touches on one of the greatest junior hockey seasons of all time.
A tribute to pioneer Alexander Wood in Toronto's Gay Village.
We have a history of our neighborhood having had a gay beginning, if you like, back to the 1800s. And there are very few gay neighborhoods in the world that can actually claim such a long pedigree, if you like.
Can you repeat the word, please? O-G-E-N.
Correct.
The ABCs of the Ontario Spelling Bee.
Unguent.
U-N-G-U-E-N-T.
Correct.
And that's still hear the cheers coming from. Gays and lesbians have remained largely invisible throughout history, prejudice forcing them to live secret lives. But this weekend, Toronto's gay community reclaimed one of its ancestors by unveiling a statue of one of Toronto's earliest known homosexuals. Alexander Wood was a merchant in the old town of York in 1800. And ironically, he owned much of the land near Maple Leaf Gardens that is today Toronto's Gay Village. However, as a magistrate, he was the object of lifelong ridicule. Here's the story of Alexander Wood and the new tribute to him.
We needed to have a reason other than just we were a gay neighborhood. We were a tourist destination, but we need to build it as more than just a place to go and have a drink. I wanted to make sure that when people come here, people were able to get a sense of the history of our neighborhood and its place in gay history. The neighborhood that we're in now is referred to as the Church Wellesley Village, BIA. And a BIA are the initials for Business Improvement Area. It was our decision to start to use Alexander Wood and the symbol that he is of our neighborhood. So we hunted around for a sculptor. We found a sculptor. We were able to convince the board that this is what we were going to do as our initial project. Other than the usual plant a tree and put in a flower basket and move the garbage cans over, we decided we were going to do more with this.
I was showing my work at the O'Connor Gallery, and so I knew Dennis O'Connor, and I think it was on May the 29th, 2003, Dennis phoned me and asked me if I'd be interested in this project. And I thought about it for 5 seconds and said, yes, I'd like to do that. And then I went to the reference library, and there I found 4 boxes of all of his letters and his signature. And one of the first things I did was to find, they had a likeness of him. It was a Georgian silhouette, and this is the only known likeness we had of Alexander Wood. And then in doing the research, we found out that in 1826, he bought 50 acres of land, which is north of Carleton and east of Yonge. And because of what had happened earlier in his life, he was called a Molly, which is a derogatory term for a homosexual.
It's the property that the Gay Village sits on now. And of course, being Alexander Wood's property, it was referred to at the time as Molly Wood's Bush. Alexander Wood was a merchant in the town of York, which is what Toronto was called back then. And one of the things that was notable about his shop was that Alexander Wood was the very, very last merchant in the British Empire to sell powdered wigs. So I have this vision of everyone in the town of York walking around with these messy powdered wigs. He was also a magistrate. And in his capacity as a magistrate, he had a woman who showed up in front of him who told him that she had been raped. And the one thing that she did, the one thing that she could use as an identifying mark was the fact that she had scratched his genitals. The magistrate decided to go to Fort York and personally inspected the genitals of all these young militiamen. And as to how far this went, nobody really knows, but you have to remember that in Victorian or pre-Victorian times, just the mere mention of this is scandalous enough to have branded him to being a Molly.
Of course, they wouldn't say they were gay because that word wasn't used in that way at that time. Homosexual, that word wasn't invented at that time. So he was called a sodomite. That was the legal term. The punishment for that was death by hanging. So you certainly wouldn't be very open if you were that. But he was also called a Molly, and that's sort of like an effeminate man. The BIA requested 2 ideas for the sculpture, so I made models for these 2 ideas. The first one was called Molly Wood's Bush, and it would have had 5 18-foot trees cast in bronze put on the corner, and into the pavement there would have been a plaque explaining about this, and on each tree there would have been another little plaque with some educational information on it. This was the contemporary idea, and then I also gave them a traditional idea, which was just the granite base with a sculpture on top of it of Alexander Wood. And the committee felt that the community would like the traditional idea, so that's the monument that they chose to do. In the silhouette, Alexander Wood is wearing a flower, and we have a flower on the maquette and on the big sculpture. I put the rose on here as a tribute to Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who made it so that the nations were not coming into our bedrooms.
About a year ago, I guess, Del Newbigging, one of our artist customers, was commissioned to do an 8-foot monument of Alexander Wood. We coated the individual parts, built up a ceramic mold on it. With a completed mold, melted the wax out of it. With some finishing and grinding, we prepared the piece, cast all the sections together, and then it was a matter of welding and assembling all the sections, and then rebuilt them a final time in bronze. The parts that are actually a shiny bronze to the dull bronze is actually where the sections were welded together. Once that's all prepared, we will then add a chemical treatment to it, known as a patination. And as per Dell's instructions, it'll be the green-black as the maquette that was approved by the committee.
Oh, that's not him. Oh, no. Coats are back. Walking sticks. Yeah. You have to remember, this is going to be about this high off the ground, right? So if you're looking up into the base, it probably was not that handsome. But I mean, I think what we created is actually. He was. Do you think so?
Definitely not
he really was very handsome because I think he looks like a superhero. He looks like someone that we can look up to.
Yeah. Oh, you brought beer?
Alexander Wood was the Alexander Wood beer. There it is. It is the Alexander Wood beer. In terms of marketing, I think the man's identity is going to sell itself. You know, we had the great benefit of the support from a local brewery as well.
A portion of the beer sales goes back into a fund which is used to continually maintain the sculpture.
In the statue, what age is he?
Young.
He's like 24.
25, something like that.
You never portray a gay man older than 25.
Right.
Welcome to Mollywood. I want to start off by inviting Reverend Brent Hawks to come up here and do a short blessing.
Many spiritual traditions have the custom of blessing sacred space, safe space. And this statue represents both a reminder and a challenge for us. A reminder of those who've gone on before us to create the kind of place that we have today in the city of Toronto, where this space is now safe space, And we thank all of those who have gone on before us, the pioneers.
We should remember that around the world, and even to our neighbors to the south, that this is something that would just not be heard of. I'm going to ask Kyle Ray, our city councillor, to come up here and pull that frilly little tassel that was chosen for him. And not that tassel.
Later on Greg and Company, The Sins of the Scriptures by Episcopal Bishop John Spong.
The overwhelming mentality of conservative